Hello, my name is Robert Placencio. I am a second grade teacher here at Ray Elementary School. We are part of the TRC Municipal School District. Today, I want to talk to you about culturally responsive teaching. The reason why I chose this topic is for two reasons. The first reason is I'm coming from a different background, a different career, like most of us in LEAP, and I come from a financial management background, where in a previous career, I was a capitalist and free enterprise, profit maximizing pig, far right wing. Now I'm a teacher. I don't need to have those far right views. My views have changed. The second reason why is because my class composition is 100% bilingual. Out of 13 students, all 13 are bilingual. I have one ELL and 2 migrant students. Array, New Mexico is about 15 minutes south of TRC, straight down I-25, and it is a farming community. So, struggling with culturally responsive teaching. I didn't necessarily buy into it, but once I was moved into second grade, I saw the benefit of recognizing cultural differences. It was a necessity. I'm going to share my screen with you. I created a PowerPoint presentation and I would like to present that now. And my PowerPoint presentation is culturally responsive teaching. I will probably be referring to it as CRT throughout the presentation. And I would like to present that to you now. Session outline. Well, since we are teachers, I developed an essential question. Then I have some learning objectives, a couple learning objectives. And I would also like to define CRT, and then the goal of CRT, and then some culturally responsive practices. Our essential question: what is culturally responsive teaching? Our learning objectives: learn what culturally responsive teaching entails and review some culturally responsive practices. What can we do as a school? What can we do as a teacher? First, what is culture? If we asked 10 different teachers, we might get 10 different answers. And I shouldn't say steal, borrowed this from Dr. Virginia Padilla Vigil because it had an impact on me. The little fish in the fishbowl, and it kind of made me think about how in our own culture, we're in our own little fishbowl, in our own little comfort zone. And culture is how we were born and raised, how we live every day, our experiences, what we're surrounded by, what we're impacted by, and what we're comforted by, our natural environment. Edward T. Hall is quoted as saying, "You think you're acting normal when you are in your culture." Again, I included the little fish in the fishbowl as a symbol for comfort zone. One's culture is not necessarily a nationality or ethnicity. Culture, like identity, is fluid and changes. It's not static, it's very dynamic. And there is no one right culture. Well, what is teaching? Again, if we asked 100 different teachers, we'd probably get 100 different answers. And I was researching CRT and I came across a video from Sonia Nieto, and it's from the 2014 ASCD annual conference in Los Angeles. So I would like to go ahead and play that for you. It's not very long, and it kind of mirrors what I think what teaching is.
The most important thing that educators can do right now is to start learning who their students are. Now that sounds like a little thing, but it's a huge thing because a lot of teachers are not familiar with the specific kids who they have in their classroom or with the experiences that those students have had or with their cultural background or with the language that they speak and so on. You know, I happen to think that one of the best professional development activities that teachers can do is to walk around the neighborhood and get to know the local bodega owner and get to know the vendors and get to know just the people, sitting on the stoop. And yet that doesn't happen very often. So I think reaching out and learning about students is a major part of a teacher's job. Now, a teacher, of course, is expected to teach, but I think that a teacher's greatest responsibility is to learn.
I would tend to agree with that. Mirrors what to me teaching is. It's also about learning. I didn't start off with second grade class. I started off in a different position, and I was moved into my second grade class about 3 or 4 weeks into the school year. So I missed a lot of the back to school, who are you, what, tell me about your family, tell me about what you like to do. I missed a lot of that. So to me, it was really important to learn about my students, especially coming from a small farming community. It's extra important to understand what these children, their home lives, what they come from, and just the climate of the community. So I spent a lot of time researching and learning from my students. Now, what is culturally responsive teaching? In her 2000 book, Culturally Responsive Teaching, Geneva Gay defined CRT as teaching that is validating the values, prior experiences, and cultural knowledge of students, comprehensive, transformative, emancipatory, and cultural responsive teaching is using the culture, knowledge, prior experiences, and performance styles of diverse students to make learning more appropriate and effective for them. It teaches to and through the strengths of these students. And then I went ahead and threw in my little bullet point. Again, teaching involves learning. So cultural responsive teaching involves learning about your students and even your school. What is the goal of culturally responsive teaching? The goal of CRT is to create a learning environment conducive to every student, no matter their ethnic, culture, or linguistic backgrounds. That's according to Frey 2010, from Enhancing the Learning Opportunities Through Culturally Responsive Practices. Teachers are culturally responsive when they hold all students to high standards, make learning challenging, engage all learners, have an understanding and incorporate students' various cultural backgrounds, make connections between classroom and the world beyond. Now, these just seem like best practices for teachers. And this is from Barnes, 2006, Preparing Pre-Service Teachers to Teach in a Culturally Responsive Way. Why use culturally responsive teaching methods? Well, the benefits of using CRT methods when compared to classrooms without these practices is a more positive classroom learning environment, higher quality instruction, higher percentage of on-task students, and greater student engagement. And I think greater student engagement, when a student is acknowledged for their differences or their diversity, it keeps them on task. It makes them want to participate more, and it does add to a quality learning environment. Conditions for learning. I think we've all seen these before. Safety. Learners must be and feel safe. Support. Learners must feel connected to teachers and the learning setting. And then social emotional learning. Learners need to learn to manage their emotions and relationships. And engagement and challenges. Learners need to be actively engaged in learning endeavors. And this is according to Oshner, Sidana, and Kelly, 2008. Now, I think that when we create an environment where learners feel safe and they begin to trust their teachers and their fellow students, they are more likely to manage their emotions. And it keeps it in check, so to say. They don't have as many outbursts. The ones that may have a BIP or the ones that may be sat for any reason, they tend to feel more comfortable and less defensive. So I think that, these are the ideal conditions, and trying to establish these conditions is extremely important, not just for cultural responsive teaching, but for just teaching in general. Improving conditions for learners. Learning is both a cognitive and a social emotional process. And it's relationships. Again, I cannot stress how important it is to learn about your students and their mannerisms, their weaknesses, their strengths, and maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. School climate, that's important. How does your school react to diversity? Is it fair? Is it equitable? Students often feel like they are not being treated fairly. So how is the school climate? Supports needed to provide teachers, staff, and students. I think we need to provide supports to staff and teachers. Conditions for learning, school and classroom. Provide a learning environment inclusive of diverse learning needs and styles. We all learn differently. We all have different styles. Provide an environment free from prejudice and stereotyping. And of course, a non-judgmental environment. In our social contract, we have built in that we will not be judgmental. We will not be critical. We are free to make mistakes. We are encouraged to make mistakes. That's how we learn. I make mistakes. I point out when I make mistakes. Boy, do my students point out when I make mistakes. And it just makes for a better learning environment. Involve parents and other individual groups from the wider community into the life of the school. We have a very engaged community, and that's one of the benefits. It's a tight-knit culture. Ensure school policy reflects a commitment to supporting a culturally inclusive curriculum and that its implementation is formally monitored. I think that's very, very important. It's one thing to say you support inclusive curriculum and then not really follow up, not really hold teachers accountable, and let things slip through the cracks. And that's, of course, from Gwendolyn Willis-Darpo from 2013, Creating Culturally Responsive Learning Environment for Students of Color. Culturally responsive practices, involving all students in the construction of knowledge, having students working collaboratively in small groups of mixed ability, authentic dialogues, having students assume increased responsibility for their learning. And this is from Villegas and Lucas, 2003, Preparing Culturally Responsive Teachers, Rethinking the Curriculum. And it's important to really have the mixed ability, I think. Students learn best from peers. They learn that they regulate themselves, peer regulation, restorative justice, and they also teach each other very effectively. When they feel safe and they feel like they're in an environment that they're not going to be judged or criticized, they will help each other. And authentic dialogues, it's important to be real, be authentic with children. Your students will know when you are not being authentic, so be authentic with them. And also have students increase responsibility for their learning. I solicit feedback from my students, and we find what's working and what's not working, and we adjust goals periodically and set expectations high. Building on students' personal and cultural strengths, helping students access prior knowledge and beliefs. This is huge. Like I said, my students are all bilingual. My students all come from a small farming community, and I am always trying to relate to their interests and use examples from their lives. We talk about comparing and contrasting, buying a truck. What kind of truck are we going to need? We're going to need to haul vegetables. We're going to need to have a big motor so we can haul chili, and we can haul, by the way, the best chili is not from Hatch, it is from Array, New Mexico. So we reflect on their own lives and try to build on their interests whenever possible. Use appropriate instructional materials, and we're always tapping into community resources. We have it's a small community, but we do have support from the community, and they are willing to help us any way they can. Creating different paths to learning by using varied instructional activities. Again, this is really big. You need to have students, they learn at different paces, they learn in different methods, and it's up to you to learn what methods work, what can we build on, what can we minimize if it's not working. And then we examine the curriculum from multiple perspectives. Is it relevant to youth? Does it relate to them? Can they relate to what we're presenting? And then we provide multiple perspectives. We often make analogies, or we'll, for example, if we're reading a story, we will, how do you feel if you were this character? What are your beliefs different from this character? Or how do you think this would happen? What would happen if this was in our community? Would this be the same outcome, or would it be the same type of situation if it was here in Array rather than wherever it's taking place? Use varied assessment practices that promote learning. I think this one's huge. Use authentic assessments that take advantage of cultural differences. Include exhibits and portfolios, oral presentation, debates. I started using Nearpod and incorporated Flipgrid, where they can actually record what their answers are, and they can do it in Spanish, which has helped me become a better bilingual. They're teaching me Spanish, and I'm allowing them to use Spanish because that's their native tongue. So that's how they're going to express themselves the most effectively. And I will allow them to present their responses orally. And I think that I've seen an increase in confidence and just enjoyment in the students. Making the culture of the classroom inclusive to all students. Reflect on teaching experiences. Determine what works. Again, I solicit feedback. I ask my students, what's working? What do you like? What can we do different? Don't automatically misinterpret cultural differences as misbehaviors. This one is, I've seen this happen before in a different school, and it's not, you two should not judge, or you should always be open to the diversity of students and not necessarily assume that they are trying to act out or misbehave. And then set and provide clear expectations. That's important too. You have to set expectations for students and then provide feedback. Teachers and school staff can learn things about the students individually and collectively. They can provide structured but flexible learning environments. I think that's huge. And then, of course, make education relevant and useful. Always try to relate it to how it's relevant to them. And then use alternate testing methods. I've already kind of shared some of the testing methods I use. Teachers improving intercultural skills. Be aware of your own cultural characteristics, communication style. Learn about your own culture, and this one's important. Understand your own implicit biases. If you don't understand what that means, Google it. There's plenty of videos out there, and it's important to understand what your implicit biases are and how they affect your teaching style and your attitudes towards your students. School environments. Create an environment that reflects cultural and linguistic diversity. Enact instruction through different learning styles and modalities. And this is the most important. I'd like to end here. Know that failure of any children is not an option. Any child is not an option. Any student cannot fail. We cannot allow that to occur.